Hi, this is Robert Rickover, and my guest today is Eileen Troberman, who is an Alexander Technique teacher in the San Diego area. And we're going to do a little recap of some work that she did with me about a week ago. In this video, she's going to be the teacher, and I'm going to be the student. And the situation that I found myself in is I had neck surgery about 3 months ago, and there's been a fusion between C3 and T2. So 7 vertebrae are fused. And the operation was very successful. I'm not wearing a brace anymore, and that's great. There has been some restriction in sideways and nodding movement. And we did some work. Eileen made some suggestion to me, which I'm going to recap as best I can. And Eileen may want to add to that. So the idea, as I understand it, is that instead of turning my head and then, if necessary, adding the rest of my torso to that turn, that right from the very beginning, since my neck is really no longer what it was structurally, and my whole spine has no longer what it was, that I think of my whole torso as what I'm rotating, that my head is rotating involving my whole torso. And that whole torso would be good if it were easing up a little. So let me demonstrate my version of that. So now a turn here, a turn back. And what it seems to me is that rather than just move the head first and then involve the rest of me, might as well involve the rest of me as much as is useful even at the beginning. That's my overall take on it. And it does seem to me to give me a wider range of turning, and it seems a little easier. Now, would you care to give us your diagnosis of what I just demonstrated?
Well, really, it was very good, Robert. I would word it a little, I think that wording is great. You include your whole torso, your whole self, really, right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it isn't that your body turns as your head turns, you're including it. And what we talked about last week was learning about the abdominals and how they have all that finesse of motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a silly idea that their motion goes all the way up to the top of the sternocleidomastoids here, even though they really only go up to here. But as
Right.
if they go up to there and they
Mm-hmm.
release a little bit and they have all this layered motion. So even if you just turn your head a little bit, it's as if this is spinning. Yeah. And even so, this is just releasing up with your head, and it can also turn and spin. So the idea is that because you're limited in movement because of the fusion,
Mm-hmm.
so what you want to do is take the pressure off the vertebra below and just above the fusion, so that everything above that and everything below that really goes together in movement. Yeah. So you
Right.
can just turn your head.
Yeah. And so my take on it is that that kind of flows from a basic Alexander idea that everything is connected with everything else. So that even if I don't do anything special, if I start to turn my head, there's going to be something going on even in my lower torso. And maybe it's a good idea to just have an idea of all of this easing up.
Yes, something's
Not
going to go on one
lifting,
way or
no
another.
lifting, no lifting. We don't want to do that, but just the idea that everything is easing up as I turn my head, or in fact, as I do anything.
Right, and you can even add to that, Robert, the idea that the abdominals, because there are all those different layers that crisscross each other and deep layers, so
Mhm.
there are all these little sparkles of movement throughout all those layers. So as you turn your head and those are easing up, there's all this refinement in it. There's all this spin of your body. So you could do something where you turn
Mhm.
and you're turning your head and your whole body. That's fine, all the way through and balancing on your hips. Or you can turn your head and all these muscles, some might turn a little more somewhere. It might then include more turning your hips. So the physical movement of what goes along is up to you, but the direction is that you include all that, and particularly along the front, because it's easy for us to get oriented like this, forward and down. And when
Mhm.
we do, that can put quite a strain on the vertebra. So that including all those sparkles of the abdominals, as if they came all the way up to here. When you have a fusion, that lets you get rotation throughout your spine. Everything joins in its little sequence. Yeah, that's it. Much better. Cool. Yes. Yeah.
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 And for me, I will say that the initial challenge, and not so much anymore. I think I've gotten fairly good at it. Is not to get in fall into the trap of doing any movement, lifting or subtle movement, but just knowing that everything is easing up and having that thought that while the abs, in a sense, you can think of them coming all the way up here, which
Yeah.
of
All the
course
way up.
they don't do all the way up really to where your head meets your spine, which of course is not anatomically accurate, but I think functionally it's a pretty useful idea, especially if you've got this um, serious modification in the top part of your spine.
Yes. And we talked about the abdominals sort of being your new neck. It was a silly idea. But,
Mhm.
if our abdominals are kind of either excluded and holding us down, or
Mhm.
they're over tightened, and you go to move your neck, your spine can't come with it. So we don't want that area of the bottom of the fusion to get irritated. But even if you didn't have a fusion, this is really good for your movement. That if you think, oh, well, what if those just float? Then when your neck moves, your spine can move with it and change with it in different areas, whether it's all the way from the hips or whether it spins in the middle. So, yes, and what you were saying about the lifting, just to clarify, doesn't mean not picking something up. It means not
Not
picking in
efforting, no
muscle to do
efforting.
it because that tightens the muscles.
Right.
But if you think, oh, they're going to just kind of expand, and just that idea, like you said, your whole torso is part of this movement. And my
Yeah.
silly way of saying it almost is your abdominals are your new neck.
Mhm.
So,
So I
good.
have found that useful, and it definitely improves the range of movement. So
And
I
it will
think
take,
that,
yeah, I'm
yeah.
just saying for anyone that has a fusion in their neck, something that's restricted the movement, that, especially if there's a mechanical fusion in there that limits the movement, that'll take the pressure off the areas above and below. Because often in a fusion, people have trouble with the next vertebra up or down because that gets the strain of the movement. But this
Right.
way, everything moves in a nice harmony, kind of as you might say, like a country song,
I
I'm
would say
guessing.
that, yes. so, but your point is that even someone that doesn't have something like this could benefit from that general idea that you really want
Taking
to
their
include.
abdominal. Tell
Yeah,
down.
you want to include all of you and maybe especially your abdominals and kind of expand their reach mentally.
Yeah, but let them have all this little finesse and motion. And what we
Right.
did last time, I had you put your hand anywhere on your tummy
Yep.
and just feel that when you move up here, there is movement. Certainly, if you don't, even if you just nod your head a little, there's movement here. But
Yep.
certainly, if you raise an arm, there'll be movement here. You'll feel it
Mhm.
with your hands. So
Yep.
remembering that there's all this little finesse that you don't feel internally, but you can feel with your hands that goes on with this and takes the pressure off. Yeah, that would just be one last little thing I'd say about
Okay. So I think we've covered that. You
that. Yeah,
you agree
good
with
job.
that
Yes,
statement?
yes, and good
Okay.
job playing around with it. That's great.
So we'll end end here.